Hey guys, welcome back. This is the first sociological video that I'm ever going to have to make inappropriate for kids because we are dealing with a weird fourth dimension of power that is not discussed by Stephen Lukes. Um, it's something that was developed, as I said in the last video, it was developed in the Soviet Union as a propaganda technique, but that has been used really effectively in the last, I would say, 5 or so years in America. The term for it that we're going to be using is flooding the zone with shit. This is a direct quote from one of Donald Trump's chief strategists, not a sociologist in practice, but a person with a very good understanding of how to think strategically about winning conflicts. His name is Steve Bannon. Um, so here's basically what he said. He said, the Democrats are not our main opponent. The opponent that we have to think about is the opponent of the mass media that has the opportunity or the power to be able to defeat us by fact checking us. And the way we are going to deal with that, he said, is not to try to manipulate people. He was not dealing at a cultural hegemony level. What he wanted to do instead was make people think there was no way that you were going to be able to sift through the amount of information that you had and be able to determine what the truth was. It's an incredibly, incredibly cynical way of pursuing power because it's not about saying, it's not about having a forthright discussion about this is our agenda and this is what we think you should vote for and therefore vote for us. Instead, the idea was, let's put out so much information that it's not possible for fact checkers to keep track of all of it. When they're on to fact checking this thing, we're going to hit them with this, this, and this. That's what he meant by flood the zone with shit. Put out, and if you remember the Trump administration, you remember it was just scandal after scandal after scandal after outrageous thing he said after outrageous thing he said. And it was easy to see this as just a person who was out of control, who was not able to stay on message, or a person who was just incredibly reactive. But from Steve Bannon's perspective as his chief strategist, this was a deliberate strategy for winning power and exercising power. While Donald Trump was tweeting about all of the things he was tweeting about, while the media was covering all of the things that Donald Trump did that were so outrageous, behind the scenes, they were able to accomplish a lot of things. They were able to win battles by not doing any of the three faces of power that Luke's described. They were not keeping things off the agenda. They were putting things on the agenda. They just were preoccupying people with so much other stuff that they were able to get their agenda through. It's really kind of an incredible dimension of power. So let's talk about it. Let's see. For most of history, just really quick, I'm going through just making sure I hit all the points that I have on my script. For most of history, the goal of propaganda was to reinforce a consistent narrative. But zone flooding takes a different approach. It seeks to disorient audiences with an avalanche of competing stories until they just throw up their hands and say, you know what, we're just never going to know what is right. There are two specific strategies that the Trump administration under Steve Bannon's direction used, but that are also, and again, these go back to the Soviet Union in the 20th century. First strategy is called whataboutism, and that's a ridiculous term, but if you've ever had an argument with somebody where you're trying to convince them of something and they say, but what about, and bring up some other unrelated or tangentially related topic. That's what we're talking about. This happened during the Trump administration when, when he was running for office. when his Access Hollywood tape came out, and all of a sudden there was all of this, discussion about, well, will evangelicals continue to support a person who bragged about sexually assaulting women? The Trump administration came out with a bunch of whataboutism because he's running against Hillary Clinton, who was married to Bill Clinton, who had his own sexual assault scandals and sexual impropriety scandals, multiple of them. So what Bannon did was pulled a big whataboutism. Well, what about Bill Clinton? How clean can Hillary Clinton's hands be if he had a sexual relationship with an intern in his office, if he was credibly accused of sexual assault by multiple women? And all of a sudden, in this, what started out as a discussion of Donald Trump and his behavior became a discussion of, well, Donald Trump is this way, but Bill Clinton was this way, and what about other people? And all of this whataboutism eventually becomes overwhelming, and you just don't want to hear it anymore, and so it's just like, forget it. That's the point of whataboutism. It is designed to wear you down by, and this is an important point of it, by implying that all actions share a moral equivalency. Now, if you think about the things that I just said about Bill Clinton, and absolutely true, right? If Donald Trump being alleged to have sexually assaulted women is a problem, Bill Clinton doing that is a problem also. But Bill Clinton isn't running for president. Hillary Clinton is running for president. So this whataboutism has changed the topic and made it cloudier in a way that disorients the audience from being able to focus on, well, but that might be an important thing to talk about, but we were talking about the Access Hollywood tape. What happened to that? It gets lost in this whataboutism. So whataboutism is just bringing up other kind of related issues that it's hard to not bite on. It's hard to not engage the person in that argument. But as soon as you've done that, you are down a rabbit hole of not being focused on what the initial point was. And that allows the person, in this case, the Trump administration, or the Trump candidacy, to effectively deal with this conflict against Hillary Clinton running for president. Okay, so whataboutism. Second is fire hosing, which is a pretty hilarious term. Fire hosing is the idea of putting out competing stories. It really is this idea of flooding the zone. If you think about a fire hose, it is just a constant barrage of water. In this case, fire hosing is a constant barrage of stories, of narratives that just keep coming at you over and over and over again, to the point that it's very, very hard to be able to sort out what is important and what isn't important. And again, the idea here is not to convince somebody that something is right. In fact, consistency doesn't even matter. Vladimir Putin is a big user of fire hosing, and he will say at one point, no, we didn't invade Ukraine, and then a few weeks later say, well, of course we invaded Ukraine. There's no consistency there. The point isn't to be consistent. The point is to give an individual who is trying to process and come up with an understanding of things, it's to wear them down so your opponent cannot gather them as a resource. So fire hosing is about a high volume of stories or narratives, continuous and repetitive. There's no commitment to being consistent. There's no commitment to objective reality. Some of it might be lies. Some of it might be true. That's not the point. The point is the volume of it, to wear people down so that they give up and they can't be used as a resource by the other side. All right. In the end, The goal of this is to disorient people and make them despair of ever knowing what the whole story is. And by doing that, you factor those people out of the battle, out of the conflict for whatever sort of power. In this case, what we're talking about very specifically is Steve Bannon running soon-to-be President Trump's campaign. But in any case, with fire hosing and with whataboutism, with flooding the zone, what you're trying to do is not convince somebody. You're not trying to persuade them. That is, persuading people is either that first dimension of power where you are using resources to try to win a fight, or it's, in a deep way, that third dimension of getting people to change their beliefs and control the culture. This is something different. It's not about convincing people of anything. It's not about persuasion. It's just about being overwhelming. This is a dimension that Stephen Lukes didn't talk about, but that became very important in American history around 2015 when Trump's running for office. But I think is an important thing. If you don't get this, you don't get the entire... You can't view recent American history through the lens of conflict theory without this dimension. This dimension is important because we became a society at the early 21st century where it's not that truth didn't matter anymore, but you didn't have to fight over the truth to win power. You didn't have to persuade people that what you said, even if it was a lie, you didn't have to persuade people that it was true. All you had to do was overwhelm their ability to understand what the truth was. And that was a tactic to being able to win conflicts. Okay. An ugly, ugly thing to have to think about. Sorry, it went 12 minutes. It's fascinating, though, in my opinion. All right. In our next video, I believe we are going to go into an even greater degree of recent history, but I will save that for the next video. I'll see you guys then.